This is really over the top the more I've gotten into it. And really quickly, the way I got into it, besides my life experiences, was at some point a couple years ago, maybe it's through the Jazz Loft stuff popping up, in its various background ways. And then eventually I focused on it, which maybe when the movie came out. And then it started hitting me, and this is all cursory, just watching the movie and, little stuff, no deep dive. It started striking me that there were obviously a zillion photos that had not been seen.
Yeah.
And that is what I do for a living equally somewhat. I dig into archives and find films. So I'm working on this, one of these lifetime projects that God knows I'll die before it gets done. There's no question. And it's Que Viva Mexico, this film that Eisenstein went to make in the early 30s. So now I'm digging through getting that footage reel by reel.
Wow.
And piecing it just back into its shooting order. How it came off the negative, not even anything else. That's all I want to do.
Right.
I might get there, I might not. I doubt it. Because it's anyway. So that led to this, which then I was thinking, there's all these pictures. So without thinking in this light way, I started, getting into it and looking, and eventually it led back to this again. A neighbor down the street is Jim Knockway, the photographer, who has his Smith connections of sorts.
Right.
Probably more so, he's in some way carried the legacy on in some way.
Sure.
Yeah. And started talking with him about it because I knew he had a really interesting eye. And anyway, what I'm trying to say, that this was all on surface skim kind of thinking, not remembering how intensely he printed each print, which would take the 10, 20,000, 30,000 prints and make it down to so many that he actually touched, because everything else is impossible to really do.
Yeah.
And that's how it led to this. So when I jumped into your stuff the last couple of weeks, it was like, holy crap, this guy has been there and done that, and he survived somehow.
I guess so.
Yeah, but you did it really. This is incredible. I mean, it's absolutely
thanks.
Mind-bending.
Well, I mean, if I had known at the start that I was going to spend 20 years doing this with my life, I don't know if I would have done it. It's it just was incremental, and the project of a lifetime, really. I mean, literally and figuratively. It was one. Now I'm doing completely different things, but for 20 years, this is what I did.
Yeah, the laser. The other day, Sunday, Sunday. It was a couple of days ago, or whatever the weekday was. I got your book. The Sync.
Eugene Smith Sync. Yeah.
Yeah, which was really thrilling because it was a great way to tie it all up. The way that I took it, and I think it's the way you meant it too.
Well, so my contract for Eugene Smith Sync, which was, as you said, it was the culmination of 20 years, really. My contract was for a book of 125,000 words, which would be about 500 pages, which is like a standard conventional biography, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and, chronological sort of explanation of someone's life. And Eugene Smith Sync comes in at about 52,000 words. I cut it. Wow. I cut it by 70% and cut it down to something that you can read in about 4 or 5 hours. And I feel like that cutting process. So the way I did the cuts is I had that book. I had that 500-page book, but I didn't love all of it. In fact, I couldn't stand some of it. And so and the parts I couldn't stand were the parts that were for utility, that were for, and then he did this, and then he did this, and I've got to explain how he did that, why he went, and I just couldn't stand that. I think the writing was dull, and that might be a weakness of mine. And so I threw out every part that I didn't love, and then I looked at what I loved, and then I made a book out of it. And, I feel like that's probably exactly what Smith did, or maybe any photographer does. When you go and you shoot, or Charlie Chaplin making films, or Eisenstein, as you said, you get way more material than you want or need, and then you go through it and figure out what's good and what moves you. And I kind of did that with that book. And a musician friend of mine told me, who read it, said, and this is just about the best thing you could say to me about that book, is it's like it took you 20 years to make something that can be consumed in a few hours. That's and I think that's something that musicians do, or filmmakers, too. But it's rare that it happens in nonfiction writing, I think.
Well, especially under the container you were called obliged to confront. I mean, societally and intellectually. You know what I mean? You were supposed to do X. You went the other way. I'm literally a person that I think you figured this out. My mind's just running. It doesn't really ever get anywhere, I guess. But thank God for the films that are firm. Once there's a strip, and once they get those done, those are firm. You can't argue with that. But I jumped right away after getting the book. I was so thrilled, to be frank, because it jumps back to many, and I put them as, I don't want to say you're a Southern writer, but it puts it in that context of some other people I've had experiences with over the life. And one of the earlier ones was Guy Davenport. Who was, a phenomenal writer, and he could write small bits like your chapters, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the photography guy, oh God, I'm spacing on his name. The guy that lived in North Carolina. He was intense into photography and into folk art. Massive writer, tied with all the big poets. Your Ezra Pounds and your James Laughlin, and he took photos too. God, I'm spacing on his name.
Wait, it's not
Jargon Books. Jonathan Williams. Williams.
Okay, yeah.
So those are my touch points that you fit.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never thought of that.
Well, you're there.
I'm as you can tell from my accent, I'm definitely Southern. But New York's been my second home really since I was like 14. And
right,
I've always,
but your heart is
that, But it's that New York. Right now I'm wearing a Toronto Blue Jays hat just because I like the hat, and I actually know the manager of that team, Charlie Montoya.
Wow.
But I usually wear a Mets hat, and I feel like maybe the fact that I've got 1 foot in the South and 1 foot in New York, really, with everything I do, is somehow important. I think you're probably getting at that.
Yeah, well, these are related to these movers that I just mentioned. They weren't living by their stove or cabin. They were, very much part of the world. The other side of this, which follows up on the 20-year part, I can relate because there's the project that I'm sort of known for is called the Unseen Cinema, where I delved into the avant-garde American cinema.
Yeah.
And that is still going on to this day. It will never. Thank God, it will never end for me because it's manageable. Because there's not that much left. There's not that much evidence left. The people died off. The records are lost. The ones that are stored away and you can get to. So every once in a while something pops up, but it's really a hidden history at this point. But the other one was when the last Ciné Salon, by accident, a friend from a long time ago in Pasadena passed away, and his name's Terry Cannon. And it ends up for the last 20 years, he was involved with a group called the Baseball Reliquary. Are you familiar with this at all?
I don't even know what that word is. What is?
Yeah, it's objects. Maybe I'm saying it poorly. It's objects the church put aside as sacred. And they did it for baseball. Because it was the intent when they started was, well, Cooperstown's not covering all this good stuff, so we're going to do it.
Wow, that's great.
It is great. You'll love this. You'll be right in there. So after look it up and dive in, and they have a great site, and they kept great records of.
Okay, I'm gonna write that down.
And eventually, somehow, it even got institutional. Well, you'll see. I don't want to ruin it for you. It really is. You'll be right there. And it was 20 years of research on stuff from. The reliquaries. If it's not enough of an introduction, one of the prized objects is Babe Ruth's desiccated hot dog, one of the last hot dogs he
Mm.
dropped dead. You know, someone's
Mhm.
jock strap. Actually, they have a piece of dirt. I think it's about a square foot of the dirt from the original field where baseball was first played
Wow.
in the United States. So you get the
Wow.
tenor of this group, and all the people that haven't been honored. They have an annual meeting, or had. I'm not sure how it's working now since Terry died, where he put on a 3-hour program where it always started with some variation of the national anthem. Like this one woman in her sports leotard singing it upside down on her head. You know, jazz bands doing it.
Yeah.
It's just wonderful. And then people would come out and speak, and they're just incredible stories. You know, the persons, mostly themselves, and players. So,
did you ever hear the song by Dave? You know, the great piano player Dave Frischberg,
yes,
singer.
Yeah.
You know his song Van Lingo Mungo?
No,
Have you ever heard that?
I don't know. No.
Oh, I'll have to send it to you. It's the whole song, and he's playing, you know, piano masterfully underneath his vocals, but his vocals, the lyrics are nothing but minor league baseball players' names, sung one after the other, and these are players you've never heard of, and he just sings their names for 4 minutes and plays piano, and it is just fantastic.
Yeah. And what's amazing is it's only 4 minutes.
Yeah.
one of the side ventures that came out of not side venture, but one of the, you know, it's spread all over because baseball is all over, is all the African American leagues, and then the various Asian American leagues and the Latino and Mexican leagues. I mean, you know what I mean? It could go everywhere because it really does go everywhere.
It does. I mean, yes, absolutely.
So that led back, circle around to Pittsburgh, because I grew up there.
Yeah.
I was born in 1953.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was coming of age in all the period that Smith was there photographing. I mean, and my deep, you know, psychological, whatever memories are of what's in those pictures, mainly because of the way he approached taking the pictures.
Yeah.
So that all these things just came together to bring us to this moment here, because of the depth of material that you resuscitated, you know, brought back to life in this work. So Pittsburgh,
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, Pittsburgh is the interesting point. You said you really would like to move there, is what it sounded like.
Well, at times, yeah. I mean, I still am. I still feel a pull to that city. It's you know, I grew up in eastern North Carolina, where it's as flat as a tabletop.
Yeah,
coastal plains, and there aren't any big cities. And the first time I went to Pittsburgh, I was just, I mean, I've never seen anything like it. You know, I don't think there is anything like it in the States. I mean, you'd have to go to Europe to find something like it. I mean, there's
very good.
There's not any mountainous cities in the U.S. Maybe some people say San Francisco, but that's different. Seattle, that's different too. There's nothing like it. Maybe Buffalo to some extent, but still.
But it's flat.
It's flat, yeah. The vistas you get there in Pittsburgh, I think, are completely unique, and it's still there. I mean, even though it's changed a lot, I mean, you can still get a feel for. I mean, there's not the football field size steel mills working and pumping like they used to, but you can still get that feeling there, and it just kind of haunts me and moves me. Still to this day, and it's that content that drew me to Smith. It's not Smith.
Interesting. We both said the same thing, sort of, in that weird.
Yeah.
And
then the Jazz Loft stuff. Yeah, the same thing with the Jazz Loft is I was so interested in the content, not necessarily Smith. You know, so, and some people have said, "How could you spend 20 years, you know, on this one guy?" And I'm like, if you look at what I did, there's a whole lot of people that emerge in my books that that I came to because of Smith, but then I turn down and digress and get really into them. And I think that ends up being a reflection of Smith, but it's not a direct look at Smith. I'm kind of looking off center. And one of the analogies I've used is, you know how if you go out at night, in a clear night, and you can see stars, a lot of times if you look slightly off of the star, your peripheral vision sees the star more clearly. And I think that also, in a way, pertains to biography too. I think if you look at maybe the best way to tell who someone is look at the people that are closest to them, or not so close, just tangentially, just look and see who's around this person, and that'll tell you a lot about them.
Yeah, no, we're all doing that now as a country with the insurrectionist of the Capitol. There's this. I find it healthy. I just wish it was more. It keeps going. Who are these people? What are they thinking? I mean, because I don't know them. I mean, I know a couple, but I don't know a mass that would go to that length.
Yeah. And I think with our last president, you just look at the people that he chose to surround himself with for his entire life. Yeah. And there's no character there, and I think one of the best things about Smith is you look at, there are a lot of obscure characters that he documented that would have been lost to history because they were so obscure, and I think that's really his greatest achievement in regard to that absurd audio collection he made, for 4,500 hours of tapes, but he documented something that otherwise would have been lost.
Totally gone. Well, and he documented it in a way that is unique too.
Yeah.
I mean, the closest parallel, which is sort of pathetic, but he's a precursor of, is Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
Who made a conscious effort to record all the time. Maybe his reasons were different, but he did.
Right.
When you go to the Warhol Museum and start digging through those tapes, I mean, it literally gets into almost a similar minutiae, except for it's mobile in many respects. It's not.
Well, I think, one of the key parts of this is that before the 1950s, if you wanted to make a sound recording, you had to have a piece of equipment that was, the size of
weight about a ton.
Yeah, and now we all have a good camera and a good recorder right here. It's so interesting.
Well, it's beyond interesting. I mean, we're literally in a revolution that way, right? An revolution right now that is already happened. It's not happening. Yeah. It's already happened, and we're just being dragged along. Yeah. No, as a maker, well, we can go so many different directions here. It's incredible. Gosh, filtering.
I used to say when I was in the middle of this project, we're 1 degree away from anything, and because of the variety of what Smith recorded on his tapes and all those WBAI radio shows and stuff.
Yeah.
And one time I was doing a talk and the moderator said, let's try that 1 degree away from anything. And so he had the audience raise their hand and they would say, parachutes. And I'll say, oh, that one's easy just because of the, his war photography. But then they, just throwing out all kinds of terms, and I had to figure out how it was related to Smith's tapes. And it is almost anything.
But you are right, and I'm sure in the human history that's always been true, but now it's more so because of the reach out is possible to be anywhere in time.
Yeah, I mean, with the internet now, you can be you are 1 degree away from anything at all times.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how this plays back in the scenario that we're playing it in, because I've never really done a recording played back as a straight talk. I've done it with artists and things, verbing off each other, and we're going to do one in this series even more so later on with the Pat O'Neill people. But I've never done a straight talk inserted, into a live
Right.
group experience. So we'll see if the numbers tank. Where they go.
Oh, I bet it'll be great. I think I love fragmentary stuff, so I think it'll be wonderful.
Well, you're at home then. So let's jump backwards back to Pittsburgh. I didn't get clear when you first went there. Was this a child, younger, or was this part of the Smith work?
No, it was. So I was married for 17 years. My first, my wife and I, sadly, but not acrimoniously, divorced after 17 years, and she was from Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And the first,
whereabouts, may I interject?
McKeesport.
Okay, good. That helps.
McKeesport. Yeah. So McKeesport, if people don't know, is about 10 miles down the river from downtown Pittsburgh, or maybe a little more. And it's kind of a miniature Pittsburgh in itself. I mean, it had what was called National Tube. They made more metal tubes than anybody in the world in that facility in McKeesport. And it looked, so there were the giant churches and synagogues, this massive U.S. steel facility, and the river. So it was just like a miniature version of Pittsburgh. And when you drove along the river to Pittsburgh, you go through Duquesne and all those little towns that are similar. And I just was enthralled by that place. The first time we went there, and then we usually went there, twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year. And I started doing research there, and it just, captivated me.
Okay, so
tell where did you, what part of town?
Well, I'm down the river a little bit more, Monongahela. Literally, so another maybe 15, 20 minutes, 15 minutes from there. The same thing. Every almost it decreases in size as you go. The towns, in some respect, the cityness of them, but the mills basically replicate themselves. Plop, plop, plop. So Monessen was across from where I lived. So in the morning, we had bay windows on an extension that my parents built to a 1-story ranch home, and the bay windows faced that direction. So when the stoves were fired up, I'd see, the fire in the morning. And then if it was winter, like now, you'd get the smoke and, the real dynamic show at a distance, long distance. So I grew up there, and then running up that road you're talking about, literally to get to town as fast as freaking possible to get some city, So it was a 30-minute drive if I pressed the metal and hit all the lights and didn't get picked up.
Where were your favorite places to go in Pittsburgh?
Well, I again being brought up there was a series of events. I was born in Pittsburgh at McGee Hospital, so I started right in town, Oakland. At first, early in life, still here, Brooks Brothers. So next to the Alcoa building and the William Penn Hotel, and there was I think Joseph Horn store was there, and then down the street was Kaufman's and the Mellon Squares. That whole downtown was really, burnt in.
Yeah.
But on the other side, I guess it's my parents, the museums.
Oh yeah.
So, and eventually I ended up working in Pittsburgh at a place called Pittsburgh Filmmakers. So we worked closely with Carnegie, the original Pittsburgh Filmmakers in Oakland.
Yeah.
So I had that experience. I had the Forbes Field experience a zillion times, which, burn a hole.
Oh man.
Yeah. I can go on Kennywood. There's a place outside of Kennywood.
Sure. Oh, Kennywood is great. Yeah, I love Kennywood.
Yeah, and annually, the way that worked back then, I suspect it still goes on now, is there was 2 things I remember that are probably gone, but back then there was always at least one annual day for every town. It was Kennywood Day. So the whole town, Monongahela or Charleroi, would have their Kennywood Day, and that was an event. It was a tribal.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah. See, I had stuff. Yeah. A lot of
stuff. I just learned something recently that got me back. My Pittsburgh juice is flowing again. And it was, when Bill Mazeroski hit his famous home run, the night after that, the same night. I mean, that was an afternoon game. Like 2 hours after the game was over, Jerry Mulligan's band played at the Syria Mosque,
Yes.
like right across the street practically from the stadium. And, those guys were all baseball fans. So I just had this image in my head of them sitting in the hotel or wherever. Maybe they went to the game, found a way in, and that band playing the night after that game.
A huge music town.
Yeah.
I mean, these stories can vary all over the place, but I went to prep school in a place called Salzburg, which is near Greensburg. So it's east, 30, 40 miles east of the city. And one of my roommates one year was Eddie Eckstein, who was Billy Eckstein's kid. Billy grew up in town. And, when he would come, some of the kids that were a little bit hip would start asking, questions and things. And the stories he told were really stunning. Of that period, because the music was just huge. Matter of fact, I shouldn't say the first horror house I went to, but literally the first was on the Hill District.
Yeah.
Smithland.
Yeah.
But that was it. And what happened is the Civic Arena that you mentioned, wasn't always there, right? It was part of it was like the tail end of that whole Renaissance project. Because it wiped out, I don't know, maybe 10 blocks of the Hill District.
Right. Urban renewal.
Yeah.
Urban
but there was a
renewal,
line. There was literally right above the parking lots. There was a line, and there it was. The Hill District started again and continued.
Yeah.
Up to Oakland, basically.
Yeah.
So interesting, but and these people playing there. I remember once going to see James Brown. A friend and I went. I forget what year it was. I think it was 1967 or so. And I swear to God, he and I were the only two white people in the Civic Arena. And it was just amazing. I was like, wow, this is a whole other universe. That's, we had no clue.
Yeah. So another Pittsburgh thing that I've learned recently is, Bill Evans, the piano player.
Oh yeah.
He met his wife, Elaine, in the Crawford Grill in 1961. He was playing there. He had his trio, and she, I don't know what she was doing there. That's where they met. And they were the only white people in the club.
Yep.
Yep.
It's totally. I was too young to understand and know. Plus, I was brought up, segregated. Basically, I used to ride at home from school the school was right next to where I lived in Monongahela, but with this guy, I can't remember his name. He was a black kid that nobody would deal with at all. So by sitting with him, was ostracized.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That kind of the stuff. And it was too hard to frame our heads around because we were white, it was,
right.
It just, there was,
sure.
Yeah. Very weird, but Pittsburgh itself, I can't go back now. I've been trying for years. My mother passed away in 2003. And that was sort of, I think, the last time, or one of the last times I was there. But a couple of years ago, I got really fascinated about literally Mon City and Charleroi, to what's what. So I went on Google Earth, which is another wonderful thing we have now. You can visit places without going,
Yeah.
And I was shocked at what I saw. It had caved in on itself. Buildings were gone. I mean, gone, holes, and stuff. In this once vibrant town, both towns.
Yeah.
And I started talking to friends and things that are still there or go back. And they said, Pittsburgh might be fine itself, but the minute you go 2 miles outside of Pittsburgh, it's Trump, opioids, and really bad economics.
Right. Yeah, McKeesport's the same way.
Yeah, no, it would be just horrible, I would think. And I have a friend, Tony Buba, that lives in Braddock. And wow.
Yeah.
I think there's one plant operating there of some form right now.
Yeah, there's still one there. Or it was, or at least a lot. Yeah. But I've heard that most of what it's doing is mostly just ceremonial work, just I don't know that they're producing that much.
Yeah, no.
But it's still operating.
And when they wiped those places out, because they did consciously, I think it was in the 80s, I guess, the mid 80s or so, is when they all finally closed down. But they literally consciously went at it, ripping them all down.
Yeah.
Which, was kind of, it's mind bending when you grew up with it everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere. It's hard to imagine, I guess, unless you've seen it or been there, these things had literally physical presence.
Yeah.
Although they were basically empty buildings, which is an interesting, quandary. If you went in them and worked in them, there was the machines, but that was it. It was most of these big open spaces.
Yeah. There's a photographer named Camila Jose Vergara who photographs urban ruins.
Yeah.
And he argues that we should just let them, just do like what they've done, what was done in Greece and Rome. Just leave them there and just let them rot. And just let them move people. Of course, nobody has done that, but he argued for that.
I don't think it's McKeesport. I think it's Homestead. They left something, or they did something of that sort, but it's sort of memorialized. It's not really left alone.
Well, it's the smokestacks. The original smokestacks that are gigantic are still there.
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's nice they did something, but the difference night and day. Okay, with Smith, if you don't mind, if we talk about this a bit,
sure.
Because there's another angle to this too, and it's Stan Brakhage.
Yeah.
And I take it you did not get to meet him. Is that my correct assumption from your?
Yes, I missed. I can't remember what year he passed away, but I was a couple of years behind that. I did reach out to both of his widow and his ex-wife. They were both still alive, and so I did reach out to them, but he was gone.
Okay, we were long-term partners, friends.
Really?
Whatever. Wow. Yeah. No, I went to graduate school at the Art Institute of Chicago, and he was teaching there in his weird way, coming and going. Like they flew him in. It was like bizarre, But nonetheless, we ended up becoming friends. And not only did we become friends, we eventually did a touring show together, which was kind of amazing. I mean,
wow, that's cool. What year was that?
92 or 93 to 96. It was called Spirit Streamstorm, handcrafted films by artists or something like that. And it was just 35 millimeter hand painted films, and my films and some others. It was this symphony thing. Anyhow, somewhere along the line, I ended up here, up north. And somehow along the line, I needed a job, and Pittsburgh Filmmakers had an opening for a programmer. This is 82 or 80. I forget the year exactly. So I commuted, went back, and I lived in my sister's place on the Mexican War streets. I don't know if you know that.
Wow. Yeah.
Which was just great. Right next to Mr. Rogers. His little dumpy houses, Anyhow, the deal was, one of the first things that happened, actually, it was before I went there and worked. It was 79 or 80. I was visiting still, which is probably why the connections came back together. They had just gotten delivered, filmmakers, those 20 cartons of film from the Pittsburgh film that Stan was involved with.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And so luckily, because of my interest in film preservation, I got to dig through them. And the only sad part of the story is there was really nothing there. I mean, it was all rotted. It was all red faded vinegar. It was already gone. And I think there was 1 or 2 16 prints that they ended up copying and all this stuff. But the only interesting thing was this, 2 things. One is a lot of the original footage that Ouija shot was there. And the assumption is because it was prismatic. Okay,
right.
So I assumed it was his. And the other thing that was there were animated photos, which my memory is so vague, but they could have been Smith's. Although the image I get in my mind of the one I can remember right now at this distant remove is, I don't think, a Smith picture. It's above a car looking down at a man who's in his car, and I guess there's a reflection of one of the skyscrapers on the roof. I don't think that's a Smith picture. But I remember it animated in this stuff. So blah, blah, blah. at some point, Stan and I talked about this in great detail. And the deal was this. He was destitute, living in New York City or something, and somehow through connections of actually a other filmmaker whose name is Jim Davis, he got a job with this company called On Films. And I can't remember the guy's name it ran. It was Robert somebody or Bob somebody, but I can't remember his last name. And he worked his way up from the bottom, so to speak, because he's this wild avant-garde filmmaker, and got stuck on that project, like right near the end. And so what his contribution, and the reason I'm telling you the full story, his contribution was he reached out to everybody he knew that needed work and might add that creative thing. And that's where the Smith was introduced, because he obviously knew of the pictures.
Yeah.
And then it was like Ouija, which ended up obviously photographing there for real. Stan Vanderbeek, who animated photos, but that would be in New York or New Jersey. Len Lai, the same thing. He was involved, but none of it worked. I don't know if have you seen the film, the actual?
I have, yeah. I have it. I have a DVD of it somewhere here.
Yeah, it's pretty mundane. I mean, yeah. And what was the whole point of the story? Oh, so he never once mentioned to me two things, which that's why I'm bringing this all up and asking you, because I really just want to know what you know. Is it sounds like Stan was never in Pittsburgh for that production.
Huh.
And I'll preface this way. Stan he's a second great artist. Well, there's a couple, but there's, to photograph Pittsburgh. He made those great films, The City Morgue and Open Heart Surgery and Riding Around with the Police in the Hill District. So, it's Stan. And that was all had to be, orchestrated and
right.
But amongst letters that Sally Dixon, who was the curator at the MOA, the Museum of Art at the time, it brought Stan and set it all up. There's a letter right before the opening of the trilogy in 1970 where Stan mentions this whole story and says he was never, says, hey, I made a film about Pittsburgh before, at the end of this, huge undertaking. And then but he says this is the first time I've ever been to Pittsburgh, coming for the grand opening of that.
That's interesting. Then I wonder what he did.
So I never heard that. The other part is this, and I'll finish. I'll shut up. Is I never really heard him talk about Smith outside of that, which was totally fascinating in your material to hear this, that there was this interaction,
right,
between them out, at the Loft and other places,
and then in Switzerland,
yeah, very, very well. It's the dynamics of people, I guess, but you know what I mean. Not to hear. Because it was a mutual topic of shared interest.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, as I wrote in my book, I think, as Smith's girlfriend Carol said, Smith was kind of obsessed with him, and I think that it was his audacity and his ambition that was kind of a different kind of ambition than what Smith was used to, was really kind of thrilling to Smith to hang around people like that, because he had just spent 12 years working for Life magazine, which was massively iconographic, and I think Brakhage didn't do iconographic stuff, and I think that was really a breath of fresh air for Smith.
Yeah. Well, you didn't meet Stan, so that adds to this whole thing. He was one of these people that was electric, which I'm, from my brief meetings with Smith, that was clear. This was somebody. It wasn't, you know what I mean? I mean, as an entity, it wasn't just some, show or anything. This was the real thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I had two run-ins with him. So, I mean, a meet-up at influential times in my life, so I had that experience. But Stan, we were intimate terms, and actually, one of the interesting things about Stan relates to this is since he's passed, everybody knew Stan knew a lot of people, but the amount of people, it's just mind-bending that were, either even just went to his class or something, let alone had any kind of personal, interaction. He was truly, a magnet. You got something back. It wasn't a one-way street. It was a very giving taking.
Well, yeah, I mean that letter that I have in my book that Stan wrote Smith, well, it just really revealed a warmth and a real intimacy. He said something like, I don't have it in front of me, but I remember your face.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
yeah. I mean, who is anybody today writing emails and saying, I remember your face? I don't know. But I mean, some people are, but they're probably not very many.
Right. You nailed it totally. Stan is a great loss just on that level of having interpersonal communications with people that were
Yeah.
inspiring on the deepest level, and not necessarily like I am, blah, blah, reaching out for it. I mean, literally genuine. I mean, there
Yeah.
I had stories about Stan that could just go on forever. But he was an enigma in the sense of this, how many dimensions are there to this guy?
Yeah.
And how many books did he read? How many pieces of music did he listen? You know what I'm saying? He took in a lot of
Sure.
stuff, and deeply,
Yeah.
not just, oh yeah, I saw that film.
Right.
The other side of this for me on this, and I'm talking about me because that's the only way I can do these things. I'm sorry, it might be
Oh, that's all right.
completely idiotic, but is and doing this recent bit of deep dive on your stuff was I veered off into the land of the Wilson Hicks communication conferences because I was trying to remember how I met Smith this second time.
Yeah.
And I can't clearly remember. I thought it was the Wilson Hicks communication conference that he came to at the University of Miami. But there's no clear record anywhere of what went on the year he possibly would have been there. And what other records do exist, it's hard to fathom why he wouldn't have been mentioned.
Yeah. So what year did you go to that?
Well, that's the other part, trying to piece together one's screwed up memory. I was at school there 71 to 75, but I came and went afterwards. And the conference kind of died after Hicks passed away. A man took it over and ran it for, I think, 2 years, but it was just too much work for him. And I think it stopped for a year and then it jumped back in again. So he showed pictures from Minamata, and Eileen was there too. So you know what I mean? It was in that period, 72, 73.
Right.
Maybe 74, I'm not sure. But on the schedules that exist, his name's not listed. So I think it's 73 is the last schedule that's at the archives. You know what I mean? Where you can read through. But let me go further with this. That doesn't really matter because he could have been there for other reasons, at another time. I mean, Miami's Miami, right? But what was cool was I found, which I never knew before, and this was moving to me the nth degree, is that is where he first showed en masse the Pittsburgh Project in 1959.
Right. Yeah.
And there's a couple people's stories online and stuff. Amazing. If you were there, I mean, if one being a child or young man, teenager, and going to the conferences was mind bending.
Yeah, I bet.
Because you were with the creme de la creme of the photojournalist world, right?
Yeah.
And blah blah blah. And but to think that he showed those pictures in that environment, which otherwise Miami was nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, intellectually created. You know what I mean? It was just a wasteland. I'm not sure what it's like now, but back then it was. So this was amazing on two levels of there was something of sustenance and yeah. But to think that he did the way I've heard the whole story, drove down there with all these pictures, put them up, literally what, for a day?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I've listened to the speech he gave there. It's called his he called it his dream speech. It was his dream of photography. And so I listened to that speech, and all the photos were on the wall around the hall where they were on the walls. Like there were people sitting here, and then all around there were pictures on the wall. And he was looking at the pictures, and he would get distracted by the sequence, and that he himself had put up, and he would want to get down, go off the stage, and walk over and change the sequence of the pictures. I mean, maybe some of that he was putting on. There was a good chance that some of that was part of his act, but there's definitely part of it that was genuine too.
That leads us to a really interesting spot. I've been chatting away here, and you've kind of been listening, which is unfortunate for you, I guess. But sorry. But I thought this is the pictures. I almost would like to stop and come back and try and experiment with you with the pictures, because that's an interesting subject. Oh, I just realized something. This stupid Zoom thing. If you stop it and we go away and come back, it just records where you left off. It doesn't make separate recordings. Okay, well, we'll just move into it then and see what's what. Your book, I remember from, it's a long time ago now, isn't it? The Dream Street book. You brought.
Yeah, 2001. Yeah, almost 20 years.
That's a long time ago. And my memory of it is that, and this is the problem with photos in general, but I think it was specific to that volume, is the reproduction issues of the time. You know, it's just a fact that happens. It's not anybody's fault, really.
Right.
But the reason it's key here is that the prints themselves are so beautiful.
Yeah.
Ones that he actually realized.
Yeah.
That reproducing them has always been a problem in his.
It's a huge problem. Yeah.
I mean, I remember the original, one of my first books is the Aperture little book. What's, I think 68 or so is when it came out. You know, and it's a great book, but again, I think it's duotones the way it's printed or something, but it still lacks compared to when you see a print.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and you know, when the interesting thing about that is when he developed his darkroom technique, in the 40s and late 40s and early 50s is really when he developed that signature technique. There weren't really the kind of art shows that there are now, you know, and photography wasn't a commodify. It wasn't a commodity then. It wasn't something you paid, you know, hundreds and thousands of dollars for prints. So he was making those prints for publication in Life magazine, which is, you know, magazine print, you know, so he was, and he was thinking, this is what they're going to do to it when they publish it. So I'm going to make the print this way, knowing that they're going to publish it this way.
Right.
So that's an interesting thing to me, is that he was making these incredibly gorgeous prints that maybe, you know, you had to go to his loft to see them, you know, like there was no other way to see them. And there's something about that that's powerful to me, because, you know, and then of course his art was the sequence of images, not the individual image. And so one of the reasons I think he has kind of fallen out of favor in the last 50 years is he used to be in that New York Times sentence that includes Walker Evans, Dorothea Lange, Robert Frank, and just Walker Evans. You know, he was in that sentence in the 1950s, and then he's not in that sentence anymore. And I think that one of the reasons he fell out of that sentence is because his art was a sequence, and that is not, you can't commodify that. So it's almost like he should have been a filmmaker. And I think that's another thing that drew him to Brakhage is, you know, you can't sell a whole wall of pictures. You know, you can't. You know, it's and you know, you think about the big galleries in New York that sell, you know, the iconic photographers that I just mentioned, their original prints, and Smiths don't sell for as much as theirs.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. So it's probably not. Well, I shouldn't. I don't want to talk about art. The art world, you know. Yeah. Don't worry, they will. It'll come back around, but he just kind of fell out of favor in the, you know, in the very small world of photographic influence. You know, well, not to reduce your argument at all, but I think all the people you mentioned in that list make. Not your argument, my appreciation of the pictures. They make straight pictures for the most part, where his pictures may look straight content-wise, but you know, technically they're not straight pictures. They're anything but.
No.
Walker
That's a
Evans makes
great
it
point.
closest with framing or cutting or something.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, his kind of style, that heavy style of putting himself into the picture, went out of favor too as well.
It's the whole no, I mean what they used to call it, I don't know if they call it related to Smith, but it used to be it was a term. It's like now there's the Burns effect, which
Yeah,
there was something called the Rembrandt effect or the Rembrandt lighting effect,
Rembrandt lighting. Yeah, that's what it is.
which
Yeah,
was big, and I think it was applied to Smith directly,
definitely.
which was nailed it, but it nailed it in the worst possible way, because it was derogatory, it wasn't complimentary.
Right, right. Yeah, but that'll come back around. I mean, the art world's tastes, changed. So,
well, there's a lot of right. You just used several words there that are correct. It really is which in many respects, it's sort of like you've assumed a role whether you know it or not, just because of your intimacy with this. It's who supports the work and delivers it to the world. Really perverse terms I'm using here, but it is a fact. And that's just a given, because you need somebody passionate and intimate with the work to be able to do that. I'm not sure if your 20 years was hopefully it'll pay off like that somehow, and there's a lot of people involved.
Oh, it's already paid off. I mean,
what you've done is incredible. The economics behind what you've done is just,
but also just the people that I've met, it's really the real value, including now it's just like Sarah, countless, like hundreds of people, literally. It's like the people you meet are the reward for this kind of work. That's for me. That's 100% true.
Yeah, well, I mean that's it. Well, we all like bread and manna too, to come.
Yeah, well, that helps. Yeah,
I know when I started in my business, so to speak, somebody said to me, "Bruce, you got to be insane. Film preservation, film collecting—that's a rich man's sport." Boy, were they right.
Yeah, well, that's true.
It's just hands down the most expensive. Oh my God! And now it's off the charts because it doesn't exist. It's really almost practically gone. Photochemical film is almost gone, not partially gone.
So
history in our new world order here. Okay, what I'd like to do is this is perverse, related on the subject.
I've got about 15 minutes.
Okay, well that would work perfect, and we've been talking a long time. There's a great video from France of Giles. I'm sorry, my language stuff is bad. Giles Mora, the critic. Gilles.
Yeah, Gilles.
Walking through Gilles.
Yeah.
Walking through a show he organized of the Pittsburgh prints. Yeah. And I know there's probably video stuff involved somehow, but the prints look really good considering.
Oh, they're incredible, yeah.
And I was wondering if we walk through it right now, I'll put it on screen share, and maybe you might want to comment as we go. I'll turn his volume down. Is that offensive to you? Because it really is a good spread.
Well, I mean, in some ways, I'd rather hear what he has to say.
Well, I'll give you the link so you can hear it. It's in French, first of all, so you have to. I don't know.
Okay.
You do French, yeah. I mean, the cadences are wonderful.
Yeah.
Let me find it here. I hope I don't turn us off because I don't know this. I hate all this stuff. Let me do this first. Let's put us up together. So we have desktop, we have share sound, optimize video clip. Okay. You should, whoops, what did I do? You do see my screen now, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, except for I lost you somehow in this. I mean, I don't see you. I love this computer stuff where you do something. Where'd you go? Well, as long as you see me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's good. There's a bunch of Sams. Okay. Hopefully I'll figure out how to bring us back. By the way, while I'm sitting here doing this, I'll be 1 second really quick. What's your take on this timepiece that was done in 2000 on the Jazz Loft? David X. Young interviewing the musicians, and I guess you end up in it eventually.
Um,
Do you remember it?
yeah, I think I'm in that too. I'm not sure, but it might be. I don't know. I can't remember. That's a long time ago.
It's yeah, no, it's a long time ago. It's wait a minute, what am I doing here? I see what's going on. I got 2 minutes going. It's a CNN piece, so but it there's 3 or 4 people interviewed. I wish I could find your picture here. Let me see if I can figure out how to get you back on screen. I know there's a way, but I'm not doing it right. Enter full screen mode. I'm sorry. I really hate this. I'll tell you one of the reasons I liked it really quickly. There's a man in it who actually, I guess, was the first person that was in the building. An artist, a painter.
David Young.
Yes. And that
Yeah.
part I missed in everything. I'm not even sure if it's in the Jazz Loft movie, unless maybe I'm wrong.
Oh, I think it's in there. It's definitely in my book.
Okay.
Yeah, he was one of the original 4 that moved into the building. And there were 4 of them at the same time.
There we go.
David Young, Harold Feinstein, Hall Overton, and another musician named Dick Carey. And Hall Overton was the main musician. And he's the one that really drew the musicians there.
And the paintings on the wall, for the most part, in the background of the picture, are his paintings.
Or David Young's, yes.
Okay. And then the other question I had, this is a technical one. In the video, I think it's for the movie, not your book, there's a little interview clip of you walking through the space, showing things. And there's lots of boxes. The implication is that these are the same boxes, but they're not, right? It's not Smith's.
Oh, no.
The new, okay.
No, that was all those boxes had wigs in them. There's a Chinese family that owned that building at the time, and they imported and sold wigs out of a store in the ground floor.
Okay. Well, I know it's a ridiculous question, but you know what I mean. It just looks like, and then I go, wait a minute, this is not right. They moved all that stuff out of there years ago. What is this stuff? It looks great. Okay, so let's run through this. Let's get past the titles. Like I said, I'll send you the link. Oh, I got to share our thing, don't I? Let me do this really quickly again. There we go. If it's too loud, let me know and I'll turn it down. Have you seen this?
No.
It's a PR piece, for a press piece. And I think he walks from the show, one end to the other.
Ces images-là n'ont par exemple pas été tirées sous forme achevée, ou alors si elles l'ont été, j'ai préféré cette version parce que très souvent le tirage est plus neuf.
What we'll do is,
Vous avez ici par exemple les loisirs des différents cachets. Vous avez un très intéressant tirage ici de travail qui montre comment il avait envisagé par exemple cette photo, à partir du tirage de travail, de la recadrer s'il l'avait tiré en tirage final.
Just speak up if you like, okay?
Ces loisirs qui consistent à regarder des gens des nouveaux ferryboats pour leur montrer Pittsburgh de
So he's showing them. You can see how Smith cropped this photograph. He used that red grease pencil. The picture right behind his head of the woman at the edge of the stage, that's a real great example of his shading, the darks and light colors. Library, there you go. The library. That's the symphony. You can see there's music. There's an instrument in its case. Music. There's Marian Anderson over here on the next picture.
Oh, really?
The picture to the right of this one is Marian Anderson. So music was a big part of even the Pittsburgh project.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop for a second. When the Carnegie Museum has a lot of stuff digitized now in their collection, so
Yeah,
they have 571 pictures that were given to Stephen Laurent, I
Laurent.
guess.
Yeah, right.
And it's very interesting to see those because those are the hardcore black and white, seemingly straight shots. And no, I think they're all manipulated. I don't know. Do you know anything about that? It looks like he gave him a lot of pictures. I thought he only gave him
Oh yeah.
not that many.
No, I know a lot about that. Yeah, because when the book Dream Street came out, I collaborated with the Carnegie Museum. They organized a big show of these photos that went to the International Center of Photography after it left the Carnegie. So we used those photos. A lot of those photos are in Dream Street. We used I think more of those photos in Dream Street than we used the ones from the archive in Arizona.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you for that. I saw
But
this
you know
last.
what?
What?
How did you know that Stefan Laurent donated those photos? Because when
Because being a museum, I'm just telling you the information I saw. Being a museum, they list the Providence stuff on the same sheets. So it says gift of Stefan Laurent or something like that. I'll send you a link.
You saw that?
Yeah, no, it's on every one of them. I mean, I didn't look at all 500. I looked at maybe about
Because
100.
when I was doing that project, and I mean, I curated that show, and we had about 250 prints in the show. They didn't know where they'd gotten those prints. There was no record in the registrar.
Well, maybe in fact they
So
somehow, you know what I mean?
they must have learned, because I mean, this was almost 20 years ago. They must have learned after that Laurent donated those. Because we spent a lot of time trying to figure out where they got those prints.
It's Pittsburgh. It could have been one of the robber barons.
Well, that's what we were thinking, and I found some evidence that that there were some wealthy people in Pittsburgh who were very interested in what Smith had done, like after the project, like 5 years later. So that was one of the theories. But
I can believe it. I wish I knew what I was doing with this stupid computer, because I know you're there somewhere where I can see you, but I don't know how to go about doing that.
Well, it's almost time. I have to go in about 4 minutes.
Oh, well, this is a shame. Okay, well then I guess we got as far as we're going to get with. Well, let's do 4 minutes more of this. Yee. This is actually, they're quite wonderful, the pictures.
Yeah.
There she is.
There's Marian Anderson. Yeah. That's, wow, he's going really fast.
Yeah, it's the person that made it, and you're also seeing the reflections of the glass. But nonetheless, it's a great overview.
It is, yeah. There's the church service. There's so much religion in this.
Even in this degraded form, you really see the highlights versus the shadow concept at work.
Yeah.
In almost every picture, which is
like in the one right behind him right there. Wow. The one there on the right with the columns, that's a bank. That's I can't remember the name of the bank, but you can really see the shading there.
I've been in
that corner, yeah.
Some of the clubs that are in these pictures I've been in too. There's the picture. Oh, it is Smith's picture then.
Oh yeah.
That was the one that was in the Pittsburgh footage. Yep. Okay, so I wasn't making it up. So that was the only evidence I saw in those 20 cases. And the irony of the whole thing is, a couple years ago, or within the year, Pittsburgh filmmakers finally completely closed and died, so to speak. And supposedly those 20 cartons were still in the basement of the new building on the day they closed.
Wow.
It means they must have been totally rotted.
J'ai fait une sélection, mais que j'ai volontairement raccourcie pour essayer d'arracher Smith à cette espèce de
That's the Hill District.
Dans laquelle on le comptait, notamment cette photo dont j'ai horreur, qui est la plus connue,
Okay, we'll end right here. I'll tell you why. The picture of the rabbit. That's what brought me around to reality and brings this to an end in what we were talking about at the beginning of how I was coming to this. When I was starting to talk with Jim Knockaway about this, it was when I found the Library of Congress book of the pictures that Smith had put up. Let me see, where are we here? Well, hopefully they'll pop up easily and it won't be a pain, which is quite wonderful. Wait a minute. I'll get through the stupid windows so people can see this. You can see this. Okay, here we go. And I found the contact sheets, the book of contact sheets that Smith deposited.
Right.
And so I took just a random page, this page that you can see. And I thought, well, okay, if we were going to do this with Smith, somebody would have to pick the pictures, which pictures, which is the picture. And besides the markings, right? This one shows up as a picture Smith actually worked on, right?
I mean, that looks like that doesn't look like one of his finished prints to me. It looks like just a work print. Because it doesn't have those qualities that we talked about of the shading between light and dark.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
So,
and it's also the differences aren't that great, which when they do have. No, I understand that. But here's what's perverse about this in this completely idiotic way. If you look at, oh, that's the wrong sheet. Sorry, I'm just completely goofing up here. Oh, here we go. The sheet itself, right? There's that picture, but it's severely cropped in the other image. And he does mark it. There is markings on it that he's going to play with it, right? But when I went through the sheet and picked it, the one I picked was this one. I don't know. Can you see my cursor moving around?
Yeah.
Boy, so my point is, I realized how idiotic it would be to try to go through these pictures. Here's the book. And pick out pictures. Even if you did pick the picture out, it's going to it's going to totally reflect whoever picks it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But mainly, it's going to miss the printing.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean,
there's a radical difference, just the cropping.
Yeah. I mean, I think you could make a case for printing these negatives for documentary value, just to see what's in the picture. Like if there's a bigger, like in that picture, he cropped it. And just the information that's in the background that he cropped out, just to get that information would be interesting, but it's not a Eugene Smith picture, so if you want a Eugene Smith picture, you have to go with the prints that he made.
How many, do you have an exact number of how many he actually made, or is that still amorphous?
Well, no, I have the exact number. But
this will be our last thing.
I mean, this has been so long since I thought about this, but I think it's around 30,000 photos and 28, 29, 30,000 photos in Pittsburgh. And then he said many times, or at least several times, that there were 2,000 pictures that were valid for his project.
Yeah.
So he went about with Jim Corrales, and I wrote about this in Gene Smith Sync at some length. Jim Corrales was his assistant. They went about trying to make master prints of all 2,000, which would have been insane. I mean, what in the world would you have done with 2,000 photos, And they only did about 650, I think. But that's still a prodigious amount of work. And that's the work that I started with, really, in making Dream Street, which I think has like 250 or 225 images, is I started with those 650. But yeah, if you go back to the negatives, you're not you're not making a Smith picture. You're making your own picture with Smith's negatives.
Yeah, yeah. And even with all the history that you've written about and others have commented upon, even if you did come up with a huge number of Smith selected real pictures, which we obviously never will, how would you show them? The linear footage alone would be like the Hermitage.
Yeah. Well, that there's the show that he did at the Jewish Museum in 1971
Right.
had like I can't remember the number, but it was like 700 photos. And he had them, and you look at the walls and they are like, there's like pictures leaning up against the wall on the floor, and then there's 3 or 4 that go up above it. Yeah, that's the only way you can do it. You could do something like that.
Yeah, it has to be massive and how a person would engage with it. But the good news is in our dream street, it would be wonderful if it could happen.
Yeah.
Really a tribute to mankind, so to speak. Humanity.
Well, Bruce, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Sorry we dribbled here and there, but that's the way life goes. Thank you, sir.
Well,
we'll be in touch, as they say, and we really appreciate you.
If I can be there live, I will, but I'm not sure if I might be able to catch the end of it or something. But
as long as you can pop in and out. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. See how it goes. Thank you,
Take care.
sir. Bye.
Bye.